Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Farouk Bagani. I'm the president of Open SoCal, and we have with us today also the president of Open Silicon Valley. This is a courtesy webinar that we're putting together for the community on how to engage and work with the current CARES Act situation. First and foremost, we wish you, your families, and your loved ones are safe at this time. And if there's anything we can do to help, we're going to leave some contact information at the end by email. Please get in touch with us. To kick off today's subject, we're going to be talking a little bit about the impact of the current COVID-19 situation and the stimulus plan. We're going to start out with a bit of an overview of the situation and how that's impacting people. And with us, we have Mr. Safwan Shah, the CEO of PayActiv. I'd like to hand him the floor and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And like yourself, I hope everyone's doing well and staying safe. So my work takes me into a world in America which is often overlooked, and that is the world of lower income hourly workers. And 59% of the American workforce is lower income hourly. They work for Macy's, they work for factories, they work for hospitals. They are the caregivers. They are the people who deliver for Amazon. And those are the people among the 10 million that have filed for unemployment claims in the last numbers that we saw. So if I look at it, it is a uniquely difficult time because you know the numbers and I don't have to tell you that in the massive crisis of 2008 and 9, the high number was 9 million. And we have already had 10 million unemployment claims and it will rise. But I also think that this is a uniquely different and difficult time, and the emphasis should be on unique, on how it happened. It happened because of something which is COVID, and secondly, it happened in a way that it has somehow unified the entire country. So it's not a situation where the haves and the have-nots are fighting this battle differently. Everyone is on the same boat. The government, the people, the rich, the poor. And that is the unique part of this. So I want to leave everyone with a message of perhaps cautious hope. I wouldn't call it optimism because we do not know when this will end. But we do know that everyone is trying to help in this situation. So that's perhaps my opening comments on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Safwan. Appreciate that greatly. And to move things along now, we'd also like to get into a little bit of the details on the financial mechanisms that are being put in place. And we have the fortune of having the CEO of CTC Bank for North America, Mr. Noor Manat. Noor, could you please give us some overviews on what the program is, how do you engage with it, what the potential benefits are for you?
Sure. Thanks, Farouk, and thanks, Safwan. I should add to just a little bit of what Safwan was saying around that there is a lot of depth to the troubles that have accompanied this COVID-19 issues, but almost every large bank and financial firm, the people with the chief economists with a lot of letters next to their names, are predicting a V-shaped recovery, which is that we'll come out of it with the same speed that we went into it. And there's a lot of fundamentals and analysis that goes towards it. I'm a believer in that scenario as well, much as Safwan. So we are cautiously optimistic. That said, this program is under the CARES Act that was recently just passed with bipartisan support from Congress. It's a $2.2 trillion program. And particularly what I'll take you through, which has relevance for our audience today, is the Payroll Protection Program, which echoes and has as its inspiration the realization by the folks in Washington that the recession that we may or may not enter will be an employment-led recession. So at its very heart, what this program is trying to do, and I think it'll succeed, is in saying, if you have employees, please keep those employees. There's a very deep realization that the U.S. economy is bolstered by small businesses, and these small businesses have lots of employees. And we've also seen large companies furlough their employees, which is to say, we won't pay you, but we'll keep your health benefits going. So they've earmarked off that 2.2 million. They've earmarked 349 billion under this payroll protection program, PPP, as it's called. And so the way this works is they now have a transmission issue. They have a logistics issue, which is how do we get this money into the hands of qualified small businesses? And that's the key part. So the program calls for is to give these funds into an organization called the Small Business Administration, which is a time-honored sort of administration in the United States. And the SB works through banks. So it works with banks, large and small, through called a preferred or authorized financial institution, and most banks are. So you're encouraged, if you're a small business, and I'll get into what the definition of a small business is for the purposes of this program, but you're encouraged, if you're a small business, to go to your local bank. You don't have to be a customer of that bank, but it helps. And we'll get into that in a minute as well. So the definition is that if you're a small business for the purposes of this program, if you have 500 or less employees, and you can apply up to 2.5 times your average monthly payroll for the prior year. So it's a very specific amount, and it's designed to help you keep employees on the payroll. There are other covered expenses that you can use for this. For example, you can use it to pay, as I said, you can use it to pay employees, but you can also use it to pay for the healthcare, for paid leave, as well as for your rent and utilities, as well as some existing debt, interest payments on existing debt. Not the debt itself, not the principal, but if you have interest payments, you can do that. And it allows you up to 8 weeks to spend that money. You can choose not to spend it, and then the term of the loan is for 2 years at a 1% interest, which is mandated by the government. Banks cannot charge you any other fee and can only charge you a 1% interest. And you have, so for example, if you get a loan for $100, or more realistic sum, let's say $10,000, and you spend it in the first 8 weeks on payroll and rent and utilities and healthcare and the other items that I enumerated above, then that loan at that point can be forgiven. So all you have to do is prove to your bank through the proper documentation, which shouldn't be too onerous, that here's my payroll receipts, here's my rent utility receipts, so on and so forth, and that loan is at that point forgiven. Your bank will not charge you for the principal or the interest. The principal and the interest in any event is deferred for up to 6 months. So you have to 6 months to decide, but any expense in the first 8 weeks will be forgiven. So that creates a heavy incentive for people not to hoard that money, to not use it as a rainy day fund, but to use it to immediately bring people back to work and to pay for their covered expenses. So that's on the program. How to qualify for it is to basically bring any documentation that shows that you have that you're paying payroll taxes, how many employees you have, and any other expenses you have. The other question we get on this is who's eligible if you're not a restaurant owner, or you're not running a retail organization. This applies to sole proprietors. It applies to independent consultants, and I'll leave it to the next speaker who would know a lot more about this. Is if you're a C corporation, which essentially means you're a individual proprietor, and you employ yourself, would you be eligible? That's an interesting question that we're still trying to research, but it isn't as if you have to have a retail organization. Independent consultants and sole proprietors could also qualify. And I'm trying to think if there's anything I've missed out. I think that, oh yes, the last piece on this is the logistics. How do you go about doing it? Even though the program, you're qualified for it, eligible for it at any bank, in reality, speaking from a banker's perspective, most banks are following a rule that says, an internal that says, let's serve our existing customers first. Good reasons for that, because A, we know you, there's a level of trust, as well as the KYC requirements, which are very onerous, are waived if there's an existing customer, as well as banks are required to guard against fraud. So people who may apply at five different banks and may get 5 loans at the same time, that becomes the bank's issue. So in order to safeguard against that, banks are mostly going to customers that are existing customers. So what that means for you, the audience, if you're interested in this, is your first preference should be to go to the bank that knows you. And if not, then go to a large money center bank like Chase or Wells Fargo, which are geared for online application taking and may have software-driven methods of establishing your identity and then following through the loan administration and all the paperwork. So I think that covers the main points, and I'll cede the floor back to Farooq.
Thanks, Noor. Just to finish off, I had one other question for you, and you may or may not have the answer to this right now. But are any particular industries, those who've been particularly hard hit, hospitality, transport, are they being given any type of priority in this situation that you know of?
No, it's silent on prioritization. It is essentially anyone who has employs people at a cap of about 500 people. There are other programs which I think Riaz will talk about next.
Okay, great. Thank you, Noor. Appreciate that. And moving right along, last but not least, we have Riaz Karamali. Riaz has the distinction of being the Open Global Legal Advisor and the Open Silicon Valley Legal Advisor until very recently. And he's currently a partner at Pillsbury Winthrop, based out of the Bay Area. And we're going to be turning over the floor to him to talk about a couple of things. There's probably a lot of questions coming across now as to what program works for you. And so right now there's economic injury disaster loans, there's the Paycheck Protection Program. What's the difference and which one should I be looking at? We'll start with that, Riaz. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Farooq. That's a very good question, and we're getting that a lot. So you can actually apply for both. The EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, is the existing one, which historically has been applied to victims of hurricanes, et cetera. And COVID has been declared by the federal government a disaster that qualifies for that program. So you can apply for that, and many people already have, and you can also apply under the PPP. Now, under the EIDL, there is an ability to get $10,000 very quickly, essentially as a grant. So that's what people are looking at. There's a little bit of a ambiguity or uncertainty about whether the money you get under the EIDL can be used for payroll, and if it's possible that could disqualify you from getting a PPP loan, which would actually be for much larger money probably. So our advice is, if you do get an EIDL loan, don't use that for payroll. Use that to pay your lease, or use that for something else. Document it that's not being used for payroll, and you won't trip yourself up if you're then applying for the PPP.
Great. No, that's good. That's good to know. And is there anything along that lines else that you'd like to add, or should I move along?
Yeah, you can move along. I think
Okay.
that was those two things. Yeah.
Okay. And so are there any traps or anything that you've seen so far, any issues that could crop up that I think that would be very helpful for a lot of our business owners out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the application itself is fairly short and streamlined and looks pretty simple and straightforward. And so one could think it's really easy to fill out, and in a sense it is. But at the same time, some of the things that are being asked, it's not clear exactly how they're being defined. Like, so for example, number of employees. Generally, for most businesses, to qualify as a small business, you can't have more than 500 employees. And that would include employees outside the US, and it would include part-time employees. And it doesn't quite say that actually in the form itself. That's in the regulations. So that's one thing. And when you asked about are there special accommodations for people who are affected in the tourist business, hotels and restaurants and whatnot, there is an exception where if you have a McDonald's franchise and you're essentially affiliated with the other McDonald's franchises or et cetera, you don't have to count all the other franchises. You can just count your own franchise. So that's fine. But otherwise, in other industries, if you have affiliates, so if you have a 20% or larger owner, then you have to look at what businesses they own, and that gets aggregated with the employees in your payroll. Or if your CEO, and this is the case in our community, people own more than one business, or they can be a CEO of more than one business. So you may have to aggregate all those businesses in determining whether you meet whether you qualify for the 500 employees limit. So those are things you have to be careful about. And then the loan itself can be for up to 2.5 times your monthly payroll. And for that payroll, you just look at US employees. So I might have a business that has 10 US employees and 200 employees outside the US. I have to look at the whole 200 employees to see whether I qualify. So if I have more than 500 employees outside the US, I don't qualify. But when I'm looking at how much of a loan I get, I have to just look at the 10 US employees and see what their payroll is, and then you can multiply that times 2.5. And so none of this is really in the face of the loan application, and it's possible that the bank could explore this with you as they're processing the application, but it's on you to get that right in the first instance.
Understood.
And I'll add to that, one other wrinkle there is that when for the purposes of the calculation of that 2.5 times payroll, all employees are capped at 100,000. So if you have any employees that are paid more than 100,000, you're supposed to cap them for the purposes of that average monthly at 100K. So if CEOs are being paid more than 100,000, they might skew the average.
Yeah, very good point. And again, that's not clear from just looking at the application. So someone who just fills out the application, they're going to probably get it wrong in the first instance.
Fair enough. Good to know these things, and thank you very much for both of you and giving us some highlights there. The last question, Riaz, is, and this could also be applicable with Noor. Are there any legal implications, or how does this affect my record going forward if I do apply for these programs?
Yeah, I think that as long as you fill out the form properly and honestly, and you have to really read all the certifications, and then I think hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of the program, and all will go well. But you do need to really read the fine print carefully. For example, there's a certification that says, to the extent feasible, I will purchase only American-made equipment and products. So, and the detailed regs haven't really come out, so as to like for how long this certification is going to continue, but certainly at least during the period of the loan, I would say from the time you sign this application to the time the loan is either forgiven or paid back, and it may be longer than that, but at least for that period, you need to purchase only American-made products. So that's just one example. There are other things that people are certifying too, like how you're using the funds, etc. And it's something that they're going to be down the road. They're going to be looking for fraud. So they've already appointed an inspector general to investigate fraud. And so it's something that even if you get the money, someone could be coming after you later if you're not careful. So I think it behooves all of us to be careful about filling these things out.
Great.
And some of that onus is on the bank as well. So the bank has to establish that the information that you're providing is a true manifestation and a true representation. On the other side of the legal question, Farooq, the spirit of the law certainly is to hold you harmless on the credit reporting side. So on the consumer equivalents of these loans, it has been stipulated that we will not report derogatory information to the consumer, to the credit reporting bureaus. So even if somebody is going through hardship and is delinquent, we are legally required not to report that. That's not true of the SBA, of the small business, because there's no equivalent of a credit reporting bureau. There is a Dun & Bradstreet. So yes, the equivalent of that could be a negative hit on your DNB score. So yes, there are all things to think about, but the spirit, let me just close by saying that the spirit of this is to encourage people to apply and to take on sort of faith that we won't be chasing after you, that this is really a government transfer intermediated by responsible parties known as banks.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. And the last question I had is, in terms of things that have come up, I've had a couple of questions posed to me. How quickly do I need to move on this, and what are the time frames, in your opinion, Lou?
So it is a first come, first serve program. It will run out because it opened on Friday. Bank of America received 85,000 applications in just one day. They weren't able to process any of them. So there's the good and the bad. But it will run out way before the June 30th deadline. So you should get in and stake your claim. And the banks will take long. I'm speaking from a bank perspective. It's not going to be as easy as advertised. There are probably some small banks that are rushing through the application process, but most banks will take their time. This will be a regular loan application. So the quicker you get in and you establish the paperwork, the easier it is and the higher your chances that your loan will come through.
Great, thank you. And last question for Safwan, and just wanting to address some of our employee base out there, especially the folks that are not making the kind of money that some of the people in this room are, but our friends who are just living on a daily wage or that. Any ideas on how the stimulus payments are coming along, if anything's been issued? Any views on that? When do you think that's going to hit?
I'll make a couple of points because of the nature of my work. I work with all payroll companies. So in this whole process of getting money into the hands of people, the payroll companies are the entity which owns, and all the data is really with them. So one of the things that we've learned, because we've got thousands of businesses that many of them are small businesses. So both Paychex and ADP are the two leading payroll companies. And one of the things banks are things will get accelerated if you're applying it, is that have actual payroll data. Don't manufacture it in Excel because the bank needs to verify it. So think from the point of view of the bank. They're playing in fog. There's a fog in the bank as well. What to do, what not to do. So they're relying on you. So give as much quality data as you can. So one of the things we are dealing with is, because we are perhaps the only company in the country which has pipes into every one of these. So a lot of people have come to us and banks have come to us that, can we use your pipes in the reverse? Can you provide us actual data so we can verify against what the business is submitting? So from that I learned this. So this is really, homegrown knowledge, which I just acquired over the weekend, because a lot of banks are looking at it. So think about it. Give quality data. Another one is mortgage payments, rent payments. If you own the building, rent payments, various other payments that you're making, get real receipts and things like that sooner than later. Don't get into the cycle, we'll submit it and then we'll keep doing it. Money might run out, you might not be early in the queue. So that's a point I wanted to make. Another thing that we are seeing, which has perhaps some optimism in it, in the healthcare, caregiving, delivery, pizza delivery, that kind of industry, there is massive hiring going on. I was talking to two different states, and this is all happening on Saturday and Sunday. I'm having calls with states and cities and so on, because what is their biggest challenge? They are not prepared, but they want people to now report to the city and work for them because they need to deliver food. We just started a program in New York City, of all places. In 72 hours, executed, cab drivers are going to deliver food in New York City, and we did that. I mean, how could, sitting here on the phone on Zoom. So something's changed. There are positions. If you're really in a bind, in a situation, cities are hiring. Go on the internet. There are recruiters looking for people. Amazon is hiring. Walmart is hiring. Lot of different places. My world is the bottom 50%, 60%. Lot of hiring is actually happening right now.
Good.
That's the good news.
That is good news.
That is good news. Thank you, Safwan. And gentlemen, thank you very much for your time on a Sunday afternoon. I'm sure the community appreciates this tremendously. For the audience, we thank you very much for taking this time. If there's anything we can help you with, I'm going to provide you with a couple of email addresses. And if you need further information or the ability to connect to other people who could potentially help you, please send us an email. The first email is opensv.online@gmail.com, and that will go to the Silicon Valley team. If you want to communicate with us here in Southern California, it's opensocal@gmail.com. Thank you very much, everybody. Stay safe, be well, Godspeed. Hopefully we come out of this the better.